So, when Princess Sunita asked me to take a lecture, so my first response, if Professor Sunita calls me, is yes. Okay, so he said, you have to take a lecture. I said yes. And then after that, everything else followed as to who I was to talk to and what is it that I had to say. So I didn't say anything, but this is a group of teachers. I've never really talked too much to teachers, talked mainly to managers. So, but it was a request. I thought I'd try and maybe distill some of my learnings and experience with you in other domains, with you as teachers, and I hope it will make a little bit of sense. I think the unique context for the teachers is when we talk about psychology and interpersonal relationships. I think the unique, aspect of interpersonal relationship, besides dealing with your colleagues and your heads and your seniors, I think, what do you think is the most important interpersonal interaction that you have to have all the time? Students, absolutely. So I thought, whatever I do, whatever I say, if you could use it, some of it, I'm not saying that all of it would be just, put in there, but that it should maybe help a little bit in exploring, maybe dealing with the students, to the best possible extent. So, so what is the biggest problem? If I could, I'd like to make it interactive. So if you can, just talk to me and we'll just go along as we, discuss. So what do you think is the one of a couple of challenging situations that you confront as a teacher? Engaging with. So one is that you maintain their, their attention and you, engage with them. I think that's one. That is, that's important for us as teachers. And I think a lot of it would actually depend on, your subject matter and how you position your subject matter, right? That how you present it to them, that, they actually feel engaged and they want to be a part of that class. Related to that, and besides this, what do you think? I'm trying to think loud with you people. Besides this, what do you think is the challenge? One is, of course, engaging them and making sure that they learn whatever you want to teach them. So connecting with them becomes important in that sense. But what else do you think happens often? And especially you would confront this. So I don't know whether I should call myself fortunate or unfortunate, but fortunately I've been teaching for 30 years. I joined IT Delhi in 1993. So I've seen generations of students. And the kind of students that we used to get, when I joined in my mid-90s, is very, very, very different from the kind of students that we get now. And very significantly now, after the pandemic, after they got used to being on the, on that very free-spirited people on the online, platforms. Of course, we're trying to adapt, but the challenges of engaging with the students are very different. Very, very different. So I'll tell you from my experience. And I remember in 94, 93 is when I joined IIT Delhi, 93 March. 94, they gave me a course to teach to undergraduate students, okay, the BTech students, who are totally innocent of psychology. They know nothing about, people behavior and all of that. So I went to the class, and that point in time, this whole concept of using literature to teach management. You use Shakespearean novels and all of that to teach management. That what did the novels say and what are the learnings for the modern corporate world and the managers. I thought that was very new, so I went to the class and we had this discussion in class. And I thought that was the end of it. But it wasn't. Next day, I had this set of undergraduate students who came to me with this huge set of books. These are all Italian playwrights. And there was Italian, this thing festival going on in Sirifort, which is very close to Italy. And they said, you did talk about Shakespeare, and we are aware of, English language and literature, and we use that. There's so much happening in other languages, and of course later on we did Indian languages as well. So we actually ended up doing 3 extra sessions on other European literature, and what is it that, and we actually ended up going and watching some of the Italian plays. That was challenging, but deeply, deeply satisfying. Because you went to a classroom with one agenda, and you thought, and these are undergraduate students, they have nothing to do with literature, they have nothing to do with management. All they know is they're engineering, 3rd-year engineering students, very young students, 94. This is what they did. So it was challenging, but deeply satisfying as a teacher, because then I ended up reading. I was young, I was learning to teach, So it was a very mutually enriching, experience. And cut to now, I mean, you all know, now when you go to the classroom, I didn't have to make any effort to engage them, honestly. At that point in time, if I was saying something novel, and if I was saying it in a decent, interesting manner, they took the responsibility of learning on them. They said that part of the responsibility for teaching is the teachers, but my responsibility is to learn, and they learned. And how? So not only did they learn, they taught me also. But the challenge now is that, now this generation is, very edgy. They want a lot of things very quickly in a very short period of time, very little patience to go deep into issues. And the span of attention is something like, not more than 7 to 8 minutes. They keep losing their, attention very quickly. And they have, I don't know, but this is true of management graduates for sure, that most of them are here for one prime purpose, which is the placements. They really want, they have very little, to do with learning, what is it, So, so the challenge is that with this generation, their attention span is very short. 1. 2, they have very little capacity to go deep into a subject. Superficially, you keep covering things, with them. They're okay, They're used to looking at too many things at one point in time. But just scratch the surface and ask them for anything deeper. They have very little. So I think the challenge for the teachers is a lot more now. The depth was coming from them earlier. They would force you. They would ask you to read up more and discuss a little more. And here is a group of people who the entire responsibility and more of both teaching and making them learn is on the teacher. So I think what becomes very important, and I'll just give you, so learning is one of the major issues. How do they, how do you make sure? And whatever it is, now you really can't change the situation. You really can't say, now let me go back and I'll teach only those students who came, like the ones who came to me in 94. You have to deal with them, and this is a reality. So how do you, deal with this kind of thing? So what helps you, and some of you might be psychologists, I'll just go a little into psychology to say, how can you really make them learn? So, different theories of learning, and I'll just very quickly kind of tell you, if I can move around with this, is it possible to just, yeah. I'll be more connected. Yeah, okay, can you hear me now? I'll just come down, okay. So, so how do you look at this whole learning process? You have to look at the students who want to learn. Can you hear me? Can you hear me at the back? Yeah. So, I'll just give you some basic theories of how people learn as a psychologist. Tell me how people learn. why? How is it that people learn? One is, yes, modeling. One is, of course, role modeling. You look up to people you actually get through experiences. Yeah, practicing, demonstrating, trial and error. Absolutely. So some of you are telling me, I mean, if I were to strictly follow the academics, some of you telling me the theories of learning, role modeling. Some of you are telling me principles of learning, practice, trial and error, and all these things. So I think what I'll do is I'll give you a very quick structure first in the first part of my discussion on what are some of the theories. So you won't be surprised, or you probably would be surprised. There is the first theory of learning, which is classical conditioning, right? You know about the classical conditioning? So so I think not everybody knows. So you people hold on it and maybe help me when we have a. So classical conditioning, actually, if you ask me, is a learning where you learn without knowing. You don't have the agency of learning. You've learned it somehow. Okay. Now, how does that happen? I'll explain it to you through an experiment which was done on dogs by Pavlov. Okay, to help you understand, how this learning happens. So what did Pavlov do? He was not a psychologist, but it doesn't matter. Whoever he was, I think he contributed richly to psychology and the psychology of learning. So we indebted to him. And so, what did he say? What did he do? He said, now, can a dog respond to bell? Naturally, no, he can't. Naturally, if you ring a bell, probably dog will not automatically respond. But what he did was he taught the dog to respond to the bell in one particular way. He wanted the dog to do certain thing when the bell rang. And he was actually able to do that. Are you with me on this or not? Do you follow me, right? So what did he do? So he said he wanted the dog to salivate. That the moment you ring the bell, the dog should be able to salivate. I want him to learn this. Okay, the dog to learn this. How did he do that? What he did was he said, what is a natural stimulus which if I show to the dog, he will automatically, he will automatically salivate. Okay. So what did he do? He showed food. So he presented food to the dog salivated. Often we blame it, and I'll come to that also, but sometimes there is some negative thing which is happening with them, which you're not aware of, but which kind of evokes the negative vibe. And it's, let me tell you, the students talk rudely to you, or sometimes, misbehave, or they talk in the class. 90% of the time, it's not because of you. I think what is very important for you to learn is the fact that the moment you think it's because of you, then that whole tension between the student and the teacher starts. And it's a non-breakable cycle. It will go on because the moment you realize the student then actually starts. So often what happens is that it's possible that the student has some negative associations which are kind of bothering. So what is very important for you to understand as a teacher at the first level is that they have their own anxieties and yeah, exactly. So what it actually means at the end of the day, and that's what ITs keep telling us all the time, that try to engage with the students to the extent possible. So we have very large classes, it is very difficult, but still I think there's absolutely no substitute for that one-on-one. Only then you would be able to understand and respond to the specific, not only the psychological, but specific learning needs that where one is deficient and so on and so forth. So the first learning, and I think which is pretty obvious, is that this kind of, personalizing, not becoming personal, but personalizing your relationship and engaging with students as individuals becomes very important as a teacher for you to the extent possible. So one learning theory is the subconscious. These are the hidden is, and okay, that's how you learn, that you develop the fear for something, and if that fear is there, you see such. So the typical example is there's a child who's bitten by a furry dog. Okay, so he's bitten by, so he has very negative associations related to all things furry. So whenever he sees any fur or anything, close to that, then the child would have fear and would withdraw and so on and so on. Right? To help you drive home the point, how significant is the unconscious in your day-to-day behavior? आपको पता नहीं है that is with you, but it's severely guiding your behavior, day-to-day life. Let me give you a simple example of what it means, and then you will probably, understand and appreciate what it's all about. So I was doing my PhD at IIT Kanpur, and there used to be a very senior prof, very well respected, Professor Usha Kumar. She was a psychologist, and she was also she used to do counseling, industrial counseling. She used to do counseling for industry people. And I remember, this was IIT Kanpur in 84. 84 is 83. No, actually 86, sorry, 85 is 86 is when she was doing. So she was counseling for Sri Ram Fibers, the Delhi wala jo group, and a DCM group, you must have heard of the DCM group, yeah? So Sri Ram Fibers, so there was this very bright, smart guy. Let me just cut the long story short. He came to her, and SRF people sent him saying that he's very good, but he needs some help. There is some problem with him. We really don't know what the problem is. He's very good in his work, but he needs help. So, you have to help us. So counselors, so he came, this boy came, very defiant. First thing, he comes, he says, I don't know why they've sent me, because I think my boss should have been here. So that was his first reaction, that why am I here? My boss should have been here. That's the first reaction. Anyway, so counseling after data, you don't say anything, you use that data to propose hypotheses later on. So he sat down. Once he sat down, so he was a BTech from IIT Kanpur in 84, very, very bright student. I think he was a chemical engineer. And so we figured out, so one data was, the moment he came, he said, my boss should be. So I was observing, she was counseling, I was a student then. And then he said that the next thing we figured out, the data about him, was that in those times, 85, अब कोई बड़ी बात नहीं है. In 5 years, he had graduated 5 years ago. In 5 years, he has changed 4 jobs. उस समय अब तो नहीं करोगे तो प्रॉब्लम बनेगी कि लोग करें 4-5 साल से की ऑर्गेनाइजेशन. At that point in time, the jobs were for lifetime, So we said this data is also important, that in 5 years he's changed 4, and fifth वाले में भी इसको प्रॉब्लम हो रही है, so counseling के लिए भेजा हुआ है. So I hope I can switch to Hindi once in a while. I hope it's okay. Yeah, everybody. Yeah. I won't do that too much, but sometimes. So he came and he sat down, and he said, so we figured this out. 4 jobs in 5 years, and the fifth one is going to be having a problem. So, like the problem. So we figured out after discussion that in all the 4 jobs, the reason why he left the job was, guess what? His boss. He had a problem with the boss in the first company, he had a problem with the boss in the second company, he had a problem with the boss in the third company. Well, I now also, because the first statement was my boss, but I should have been there. Okay, so I think I'm just giving you on the side. Now you see, this is, this was a pattern. I mean, and you have to look at your students if they do it. This is a pattern. Whenever you have a problem with one person, he is wrong. Whenever you have, suppose you have a problem with 2 people, maybe both of them are wrong. But when you have the same problem with 3, 4, 5 people, it's time for you to think that what is it that I'm doing in that relationship because of which, and you'll find students of this kind in your class. And you always label them as troublesome. उसकी इससे भी प्रॉब्लम होती है, उसकी उससे भी प्रॉब्लम होती है, उसके हॉस्टल में भी होती है, मेस में भी होती है, और क्लास में तो होती है, अपने बैचमेट से भी होती है. So So generally our tendency is to label and put that, boy, on the corner. You want to avoid someone. But I think it is a problem that this boy suffers. If he's rude to you, it's not because of you. It's because of something that is inside of him, which is, kind of. So as a teacher, it's very, very important for you to be sensitive to the fact that this boy is carrying his own baggage, or this girl is carrying her own baggage, and that is why the child is behaving the way. It's not because of you. Okay, so that kind of changes, and he's not aware of it. He's not aware of the fact. So this boy, the boy who came for counseling to Ushaji, was, he was asked. So we figured out boss के साथ उसको हर जगह उसको boss से problem होती थी और यहाँ पर भी boss से problem होती है. So then, of course, in psychology, we went in deeper, and I asked you this question. And so, what is absolutely essential in a superior subordinate relationship? हमेशा जरूर होगा वो boss है और subordinate है तो वो जरूर होगा उस relationship में क्या? Why is someone a boss? Why is someone a leader? Why is someone your superior? Power. Absolutely right. So there will always be someone who's superior to you will always have power. And from in your early childhood, you are taught how to deal with power through your interactions with your parents in general and father in particular. All cultures, fathers are the power. So I'm not getting deeper into that. We did try to find out what your problem was, because he had not resolved those power issues from him. He was not used to accepting power in his early childhood. So जब भी उसको power की situation में किसी ने somebody asked him to do something, he would reject power because he was not used to taking that power. So, but I thought of the 5 companies, the 5th company where he was working right now and before earlier. The 5th was most sensitive. All the earlier 4 ones lost him because they thought that he was a troublemaker without really figuring out why the trouble was there, where the trouble was really coming from. This one sent him for counseling, so he did counsel, and eventually, I don't know what happened. I didn't, but for some time he was with SRF. He stayed there. I don't know whether he left it or not, but it helped him. So you are a counselor. You have to look at students from that sympathetic eye of wise. Don't get into the details. You're not a psychologist to say कि बचपन में authority नहीं है. अगर उस 4 लोगों के साथ problem है, he's struggling with something which is inside of him, and the least we can do is to be sympathetic to what the child is going through. And I tell you, 9 times out of 10, this is the case. So the first learning principle is this unconscious learning which has happened in people's mind, and you have to be conscious of them, for your students. ये उनकी problem हो सकती है, और वो आपको teaching में help you. The second, so one way of learning is subconsciously learned is association से, and that's reflecting in his or her behavior. What is the second? I think one of you said. What is the second way of learning? Reward. So if I get something I like, I want to do that. If I don't, so this is again, I think psychologists have been very good at taking animals, doing experiments on them, and then generalizing, and they're often, correct in doing that. So Skinner, Skinner is a psychologist who did this experiment with pigeons. What did he do? He had a maze. Maze था जो कि pigeon को clear करना. Okay. So you start at one point, maze में ये होता है ना, you start at one point, go through different, blind alleys, this, that, and come. Now what they had done in this maze was that so for every, choice that the pigeon had to make, there was one right choice which would lead to the exit, and there was one wrong choice which would lead to a blind alley. Are you with me on this or not? So कबूतर काफी छोड़ा हो गया, उसको इधर जाना था, अगर इधर जाएगा तो blind alley होगा, इधर जाएगा then he eventually lead to the right path. So every time the pigeon made the right choice, the pigeon got what? Got a reward, got some something to eat, and every time it made the wrong, it got a shock. So what happened was that they were reinforcing right behavior positively, and they were negatively reinforcing the wrong behavior. So appropriate combination of rewards and punishments actually become very important. So there have to be, and just being sensitive doesn't mean that all kinds of behaviors would be rewarded and all kinds of would be tolerated. You need to know exactly what is the wrong behavior and how do you ensure that. And I'll give you a simple example again from my experience of तो आप बच्चों का रिवॉर्ड क्या होता है? Grades, marks, something, right? Which is something to look at and they find it fair and all. It's very motivating for them. I'll give you a simple example. So I started my career at the IS Academy University. I submitted my PhD thesis. They came to campus at 90, and they, 90, I went to the IS Academy and I started taking the session. Now, what happened at that point in time was there were supposed to be these, the foundation course was about phase 1, phase 2. Foundation course had all the service people from all the services, and then phase 1 and phase 2 were only PIS. So, it was very strange. And what would happen was that initially, आते थे एक दो क्लास में फिर सारी classes, irrespective of who was taking the class, irrespective of what the course was about, the attendance will go down to 5%. 5% से ज़्यादा बच्चे क्लास में नहीं बच्चे क्लास में नहीं. Any guesses why? And think of it in terms of rewards and punishment. Think in terms, there was absolutely nothing at stake for them. बहुत पढ़ के 20 घंटा पढ़ के civil services में आ गए थे, और they were kind of tired of reading, and there was nothing. So they got some marking in the training, and eventually when they became 25-30 years secretaries, तब शायद उसका कोई फर्क पड़ता. But there was absolutely nothing attached to how they performed on the training. So there was no reward, no punishment. So you would see a whole lot of them roaming around on the mall road when the class is up. The teachers are sitting there and they're roaming around on the mall road. So there were no reward. Now I think the academy people have realized अब वो इतना ज़्यादा हो गया है. Now they give them an MA degree in public management from JNU. Okay, so because they realize there are no rewards, and if there are no rewards, there are very few people who would learn for the sake of learning. And what becomes important for you as a teacher? हम लोग क्या सोचते हैं कि रिवॉर्ड क्या है? सिर्फ मार्क्स और रिवॉर्ड. But students value a lot of things in class. You individually identify something. Sorry, individual appreciation, different soft types. You don't have to be very kind of upfront in the face and sure, but gently, giving small. So figure out what is it this group really values, and then if you give those small little rewards, they become a lot more engaged, and they're willing to. The learning really happens. So for you, knowing is not enough. For teachers, we can be very, very knowledgeable. We can do our research with that knowledge, but at the end of the day, अगर students ने वो सीखा नहीं, तो उसकी कोई value नहीं है. And that is why, these things become very, very important. Okay, so, but yes, please. Yeah, good. Ask question. Yes.
So now all of these feel like external motivating factors that we are the ones providing the structure and the feedback. How to get from that to internal motivation?
I'm just coming to that. That is the third part. So the first was classical conditioning, where you learned without knowing you learned something. आपने कोई fears develop करके कोई pattern develop. Second में आपने learn तो किया, but not for the sake of learning. You learned it because there was some reward or punishment attached to it. That is, it's agentic, but it's not truly agentic. The third that you talked about is when people choose. This is called a social learning theory, Bandura's, social learning theory, where people choose to learn. considered to be unreal, and that's why I think teaching may look like the easiest, but it's one of the most difficult professions to be in, because the student is not just going by what you're telling him in the class, but the student is looking at you all the time outside the classroom and trying to figure out what is it that you do, in your when you're not in class, or even when you're in the class. Smallest possible thing. It's very important for role modeling is the mechanism. And so let's look at how I'll give you another example of kind of role modeling and people choosing to do things of their own. But when do you think people, how do they identify role models? Tell me. आप अपना बताइए कि कौन role model है? Yesterday we were having an MBA interview and we had a student from Manipal Institute of Technology. He came and he appeared and we asked him, okay, who's your illustrious alum? So Satya Nadella is an alum of Manipal Institute, and so I said, I assumed that he would be his role model, and I said, so what do you follow from him? He said, I follow nothing from him. He's not my role model. So obviously he had seen things in him that, that are not worthy of following. So tell me, why do people follow others? Tell me, what are the underlying, and that's the toughest task of a teacher. First thing, what is it? Where do you get power? First thing, most important thing, the students will look for, first and the most important thing in a classroom for you to hear. Sorry? Expertise. Absolutely. There is no substitute for your knowledge and competence. The moment they see you faltering in class, you have gone, आपने 5 कदम आप आगे बढ़े होंगे, और अगर एक बार उनको ये ऐसा नहीं है कि you are humans, you need not know everything, but they can sense how seriously you are actually delivering a lecture, how well prepared you are for the lecture. So the first and the most important thing is that you know your subject matter. उसकी बहुत ज़्यादा nothing can, no amount of being good and no amount of being empathetic, no amount of caring for that is going to help if you're not ready, because that's what you're going to do day to day, every day when you go to the exam. So that's the first one, that you know. Do they think that you know your subject matter or not? That's the first thing. Second, tell me what else? Yeah? Exactly. Then are you able to, so I've been teaching for more than 30 years now. Same thing I would teach. But are you able to, tailor make it? So I teach to part-time students who've been working for, 15 years, 17 years, and I've been teaching to MBA students for 2 years of work, etc. And then I've also been teaching to media who have no idea about management or psychology. So it's very important that you tailor-make the knowledge for the group that you're targeting. And then, of course, you talk to researchers. You also talk to research scholars. So what is it? How are you going to? I think teaching is not easy. I know of some of the teachers now at IT, and including me. If I have a class next day, I am not able to sleep well. If I have a morning class, then I'm not able. 30 years, 60 semesters, if I've taught on an average 2 courses per semester, I have taught at least 120 courses. But I'm still nervous before I go. I was nervous before I came here. Because you want to make sense. My knowledge is good enough. But would these people be really interested in listening to what I'm saying? So the first is no substitute. Second, that effort to tailor make it to the group that you're going to, talk about. Then, so your competence is established. If you tailor make it to them, then you're also able to engage. आप उनसे examples पूछते हैं, उनके examples उनके relevant, उनके hospital से relevant, whatever, Then it becomes, and the third, of course, is what? And then what else? What? Sorry? that interpersonal connect, when they identify, I'll give you a very simple example. कि वो interpersonal connect, people को एक lecture में चला वैसे नहीं चलता. So then when people connect with you, when they look up to you, they interpersonal happens, then they listen to you. And I was teaching my BTech course, that same 94 course, the first course where they got all these Italian playwrights and all. So what happened was that it was a long course, so I thought, let me call a guest speaker. Okay? So I called a guest speaker who was an undergraduate from IT Delhi. Okay? वो BTech करके गया था, बहुत साल पहले, he was older than me also. And then he said, okay, you come and talk, because I thought. And with due respect, I'm not taking his name, he came and he just sat and talked about, I was in this hostel and I was in that hostel. And जब हम यहाँ थे, so this is what we used to do, this is what, we had fun. कुछ नहीं management, old. And the only thing that he said was that however many years, 15 years, 20 years, I used to sit on the other side of the table. So सबको पता चल गया कि यहाँ का BTech है, मैंने नहीं बोला था initially. He didn't do anything in class, nothing. Just sat, had talked about hostel life. I felt that in sheer ways he could have taught so much. But guess what? He had one of the best feedbacks in that course of all of this. He was able, so you have to see who are the people, if you call, who are the people who are acceptable to them as you have to be acceptable to them. They have to look at you as, I'm saying things that are very lofty, but this is the role of it. And I believe, and I think Teacher Rakam said, that if you really look at the kind of job that teachers do, this should be by far the most highly paid profession in any society. Actually, it should be, because you're preparing people for all the others. So, since not all of us work for money, and so I think our motives are different. So the responsibility for the teacher is a lot more than the responsibility for anyone. But of course, people in the okay. So role modeling happens by three things in the classroom. That one, you know your subject. Second, you are able to communicate to them in their language the way they understand. And third, they should have that sense of connecting with you, like you said. They should be able to connect with you. Now this person could connect because the other उसने वही connect. कुछ बताने के लिए class में क्या होता है? I can tell you those kids would never forget what he told them because they were connecting so well with him. If we've given 5 learnings from his corporate life as to what works, what doesn't work, I think the children would have learned so much. Okay, so it becomes very, very important for you to. I may be giving you a very tall response to the extent possible. This is what helps people, the students, connect a little better, learn a little more, take some responsibility for learning, and I think, of course, engaging them, involving them, all those, small little things, practice. Somebody said, what else did you say? There were these, okay. So this is, I hope you get my point, the 3-4 points that I have made. Now, what are some of the principles? One principle of learning that I will give. One is practice. That when people, I can't draw. So there is a learning curve. I should have told you that. There is a learning curve. Learning curve क्या होता है? X-axis पे आपका time है और Y-axis पे आपकी learning है. ठीक है? Learning and time. And the curve is like this. थोड़ा straight जाता है फिर वो flat हो जाता है. समझ गए क्या होता है? कुछ समय तक learning हो रही है फिर वो learning flat हो गई फिर वो learning नहीं हो रही है. Okay? So mind capacity है. कुछ समय तक वो सीखता है उसके बाद वो फिर बंद हो जाता है. So what does this mean for you? Generally they say there is no hard and fast rule. It can range from anywhere. Even plateau आता है. That's what I'm saying. There's a plateau that comes in learning. When do you think the plateau can come after 5 minutes? Not 5, 8 minutes, 12 minutes, 20 minutes. मतलब वो plateau आता है different. Are you understanding what I'm trying to say? Can you tell me ये किसका function होगा? designing a program. Okay, and I have to see कि मैं इसमें 8 मिनट का सेशन दूँगी, 15 मिनट का सेशन दूँगी, 20 minutes को दूँगी, 25 minutes. What would determine this? हाँ? Stimulus से ही related है. A variation is one part definitely, but anything else? So let me give you an example from my personal. So we are in engineering institute, right? So what happens in an engineering institute? I go and meet. So we have classes which are 90 minutes. Like इसमें बीच में हम 20 minutes के दो examples होंगे and then I close. So I go and talk to the professors in engineering department are like, how can you teach for 90 minutes? हमको तो 50 minutes पढ़ाना ही बड़ा मुश्किल हो जाता है. You know, how do I teach people for film? So now can you guess what is it? It's a function of the subject matter. How complex the subject matter is, you have to decide what should be the time with which you do. Are you with me on this or not? More complex. In fact, I remember there used to be a very prominent, eminent prof at IT, Delhi Computer Science. So he was very, very eminent. And he was sitting and we were he was thinking, so I said, sir, what are you thinking? He says, I'm going for a class. I said, for a class for you? I mean, you're so eminent that you've been teaching. So he said, no, I'm thinking of the jokes that I have to crack in the class. Which means when the plateau comes, are you able to divert their attention, give their mind a little space to assimilate what has been taught, and then move ahead with. So you do this, ask a question, something like some discussion, because that is the way your mind actually